All right, good afternoon. I believe folks should be here for the EBCE Recurve webinar on how we're using data analytics and flexible procurement options to address peak energy use. If that's what you're here for, you're in the right place. I'll go ahead and introduce myself and hand it off to Taj on our team here at EBCE, and then let McGee handle things on the Recurve side, and then we can get started. My name is Beckie Menten. I'm program manager at East Bay Community Energy. We are a community choice aggregator serving the Alameda County area. Our emphasis is on renewable and carbon-free energy resources for our communities. My job is doing program management for building electrification and energy efficiency, and I've been the internal lead on our procurement effort for demand-side resources with lots of support from our power resources and data analytics team. Taj, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hello, this is Taj Ait-Laoussine. I am the VP of Technology and Analytics at East Bay Community Energy, in charge of data analytics, and I've been with the organization for a little over 2 years.
Great, thanks, Taj. Beckie, I'll jump in. My name is McGee Young. I'm the CTO here at Recurve. For those of you who don't know us very well, we provide open source, real-time measurement and verification of energy efficiency and other demand flexibility resources as a software-based service to utilities and other organizations. I've got with me Adam Shear, our Director of Customer Solutions, whose work is going to be pretty prominently featured in the later part of the discussion today. Adam, if you want to just say hi real quick and maybe say who you are, say a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Hey, everyone. Thanks for tuning in here today. My name is Adam Shear. I think I probably know at least some of you. I spent 5 years at PG&E bouncing around their energy efficiency group and policy programs and evaluation. Always focused on data and analytics, and jumped at the chance to join Recurve and help EBCE here get a handle on their individual meter assets. So looking forward to the conversation.
Great, so I can kick us off here. A note also for logistics, please keep yourselves muted during the presentation and feel free to use the chat window if you have a question as we're going through the presentation. We have time at the end to do question, answer, and discussion as well. All right, so let's see if I can run this thing.
And we are recording.
Oh, okay, great. Yes, and we also are recording, so keep that in mind. One of the things I wanted to do to sort of frame this conversation is just give you an idea of the priorities that initiated this project that we engaged with in Recurve. Here at East Bay Community Energy, as I mentioned, we're very interested in procuring carbon-free and high renewable resources. But as many of us know, the more and more renewables that we get on the grid, the more exacerbated the evening peak problem becomes. It's harder and harder to find carbon-free resources that we can procure during those times. So part of our effort here was to see if demand-side resources could be a source of carbon-free energy. So with that in mind, we started this project with the priorities of procuring demand-side resources and doing that in a way that looks at their avoided cost impacts, not only avoided costs from the traditional CPUC ex-ante framework, but we're also interested in exploring if we can measure the avoided costs from a more CCA-specific resource-based perspective. We're looking at long-term peak reduction. This benefits us not only in terms of being able to meet our load goals with carbon-free content, but it also helps us in terms of adding load as we increasingly electrify buildings and transportation, many of which frequently are expected to come on during those peak load hours. We're also interested in seeing if we can develop and scale holistic flexible programs. By this, we mean programs that don't look at a single resource such as energy efficiency, but look at how we can potentially integrate multiple strategies, energy efficiency, flexible load, demand response, under one umbrella. And then finally, using the data analytics platform that we've developed internally and that Recurve has offered through our engagement with them to see if we can make informed measured impacts of demand side programs. This means both measuring performance off the meter, but even before that, this means using targeting analytics to select a cohort of our customers who have the most benefit from the programs that we're designing. So those are some of our guiding principles going into this. Now, why this is important for us. Some of this I already mentioned, but again, as we focus on decarbonization, we're trying to meet more and more of our energy through renewable sources. At the same time, we're electrifying our buildings, we're electrifying our transportation, and many of those resources are exacerbating our evening peak situation. Having this data analytics platform and programs that are built on these premises also can be really helpful in terms of responding to immediate disruption. This is both in terms of resilience, understanding how the public safety power shutoffs are impacting our population, using data analytics to know which customers are most likely to be impacted and who among them are vulnerable populations. For example, folks on medical baseline. But it's also been very interesting as we measure the impacts of this current global pandemic we're all experiencing and the way that that has impacted our load. So these are just a few of the ways that these data analytics platforms can really help us have better business intelligence as we go about our core service of providing energy. So I'm going to hand it off to Taj to speak a little bit about the data analytics platform that we've developed at EBCE. Taj, I can run through the slides for you until we get to the demo phase.
That's great. Thank you, Becky. So I was going to just go over a couple of slides related to the analytics platform that EBCE has put together, which has been a catalyst to us really being able to make data-driven decisions and also to support the work of the Recurve team. EBCE set out to build a platform when we started realizing that we would be receiving a significant amount of data from all of the meters in our service territory and that it was important to have a central repository for that data. So we built the platform using cloud technology. In our case, it's using Google Cloud Platform. The purpose of the platform really is to act as a key central repository and reporting system for the entire organization. So it's a central place for all of the meter and billing and transaction data that's being collected for us to run our operations. It integrates all sorts of different relevant data into EBCE's operation. The table on the right kind of describes the types of data that we bring in. We bring in information from PG&E as our billing agent, if you will. They provide us customer characteristics, billing determinants, billing amounts, usage data, both on a monthly basis, but also on a 15 or hourly basis. So we bring that information in. Our data management service provider provides us with the calculations of the bills and how much each customer was billed. So we bring that in as well. We work with our scheduling coordinator that interfaces with the California Independent System Operator to pull in our schedules, to pull in our contracts, to pull in our the prices, and also to post what's called our settlement quality meter data. We do go directly to the CAISO to pull information on nodal prices. We work with the County of Alameda to pull all the tax assessor data, which is publicly available information on the square footage, age, value, number of bedrooms of properties in our service territory. And then we pull in weather information and other interesting information such as census data or CalEnviro screen scores. So all that information is integrated. We are running it on a cloud technology to ensure that we can handle large data sets in an efficient and cost-effective manner. And it also facilitates the integration with other systems and providers, including obviously the one we'll be talking about today with Recurve. So on the next slide, there's an overview of why I developed the platform. Really, the idea here was to be able to provide insights into our organization about the key product that our customers buy and that we sell, which is the energy, and to really understand it from a 360-degree perspective. So not only knowing what's happening in the past, but what will happen in the future, being able to segment it and organize it by rate class or by customer class, being able to understand how much data we've received, where we're missing data, et cetera. So it's really meant to be a way for us to truly have information about the key product in question, the energy, and to make sure that our organization and the ecosystem of partners that we work with have readily available information so that we can be making informed decisions that are based on data. So what I'll do next is I'll give you a quick overview of our platform. So I'm going to say share, Beckie. Once you give me the opportunity to share.
I think, do you have the ability to share?
There we go. I can now, yep, share.
Great, awesome.
So do you see the screen with EBCE Analytics dashboard?
Yep.
Great, so this is kind of the landing page for folks to get into our system and understand, you know, the reports that are being made available to them. So this is really just a front end into all of the data in the warehouse that we have. But we've created a series of dashboards that enable people to basically interrogate the system and kind of answer the questions that they want to take a look at. So some of our new employees will often go to EBCE at a glance to get a quick sense of who EBCE is, how much we sold in 2019, how much we're expected to sell in 2020, what our max demands were, how many customers we have, how that breaks down by sector, how that breaks down by product, how that breaks down by rate class, and how that breaks down by jurisdiction. So this is just one dashboard that kind of provides you information. It gets updated every day, although this information doesn't change that frequently. Our programs team and the folks that work with our jurisdictions are very interested in understanding how numbers break down on a jurisdiction by jurisdiction basis. So this, for example, provides you for all the jurisdictions that we serve, how many customers are enrolled, what's the KWH they represent, how many have opted out, and how many remain to be enrolled. These are typically new customers that haven't quite yet been fully configured in PG&E systems. So that's another type of report that we make available to our users. Then when we start to think about programs, we've developed a load shape report that this is just really kind of like the starting point of a lot of the work that you'll see that Recurve is doing. But this enables any user in our organization to select a particular rate and to view the load shape of that rate, to view it by jurisdiction, to view it by season, to view the difference between NEM versus non-NEM customers, and to view the difference between by month. So all this data is available, to be copied, exported, etc. But again, it's yet another way of looking into the kind of the details of our load. Our our accounting team is also very interested in understanding what has been reported in terms of KWH consumption and how much was actually invoiced. So this particular report shows you two sets of bar graphs. The first one is the KWH report, January, February, and March of this month. The gray bar is what our model, because we have an internal model that estimates load when load is missing, says, and what has been actually invoiced to the customer. So nice to know that what our model and what's been invoiced look alike. But of course, as you go towards March, where the bill cycles haven't really closed, we now have basically that's what's been invoiced so far for load in March, but this is how much we're ultimately expected to be invoicing for the month of March in terms of KWH, because there's plenty of bill cycles that started in March that have not yet ended. So this is effectively a good way to understand what the actual KWH is going to be for the month of March, as well as what the expected revenues associated with that KWH. And of course, I can extend this to the entire year so that we can actually now effectively have a kind of a view of what we expect the number of KWH to be sold, and at current rates, what the revenues associated with those KWH are expected to be in 2020. And then finally, our wholesale team is very much interested in understanding how our wholesale load is performing, how our schedules are performing in blue compared to what is actually ultimately settled in green. And so you'll notice that at the beginning of March, things looked pretty nice, but then suddenly, as shelter in place started to take hold, obviously we're in California, shelter in place started at the evening of the 16th, you start to see these deviations And that's because, unfortunately, we have to adjust to a new normal. So we've finally been able to adjust our load schedules to now better reflect what the actual load is. And here we inform our scheduling coordinators of the percentage of meters that we have access to. So right now we have access to 97% of the meters all the way back to April 5th. So that this is all the interval data that we receive from PG&E that we aggregate and package. So effectively, these load numbers are accurate because 97% of the meters are actually reporting the data that you see here. And then as you move forward, you have less and less data. So the last thing I wanted to quickly show is, this particular concept of what's happening right now in this new normal. So we've put together a dashboard for our team to kind of understand the impact that COVID-19 has had on our load. So I'll first show you a load shape report, which is effectively color coding in red days that are considered shelter in place, and in blue days that were considered regular days. So you'll see that sequence, it starts back on February 1st. We had regular days, and then suddenly in red is shelter in place. We actually decided to call the 16th of March a shelter in place day because people had pretty much at that point adjusted to the fact that it's shelter in place. So I can see that this is the whole entire load. This is the difference in load shapes. This is an average daily load shape. And I can start to dig into what's happening to, say, the residential sector. So this is not weather normalized, but this is effectively showing you what the residential load shape used to be on a regular day. And you can clearly see the dip here that's related to NEM customers actually generating. And then in red is what the load shape is currently now that we're in shelter in place. On this graph here, you see the difference in the average daily kWh for different rate classes. What's interesting is that we see an increase in our residential rate class, but a decrease in all of our other commercial and industrial rate classes. Again, this is not weather normalized, but this is a good way to potentially see what's happening, say, for small commercial. And of course, you're going to see a significant change here. Again, now I'm only showing just the small commercial load. We're also able to look at it on a day of the week average, as well as on a jurisdiction by jurisdiction. The next key thing for us was to understand which of our customers were actually impacted. So this is actually a report that is updated daily, much like all the other reports, and that effectively identifies out of our top 200 customers, which ones have had a change in their load profile that is significant. So there's 68 customers that have been identified, and so you can click on any particular customer and see how their load has changed before and after. So this guy changed not that much, but there is a significant drop, so that caused it to be flagged. Let's take a look at the ones that changed the most. So if I select this particular customer, you'll notice that there was a significant drop in their load. Looks like their operations have recovered, but there was a significant drop in load at that point in time. If I take a look at this guy, same thing. If I take a look at this guy, that's really a clear-cut case of a change in load. So this is enabling our marketing and account services team to really understand of our key customers, which ones are truly changing their operations. And then that combined with everything else that I showed earlier enables our load procurement people our procurement folks to understand how to adjust their schedules. We've also started to look at weather normalized data. So this is a different set of graphs that shows you what the load shapes were compared year to year without weather normalization and then with weather normalization. And even after we weather normalize, this is what ultimately we see is that right now, without weather normalization, we went from about 1,500 to 1,400. With weather normalization, we went from 1,439 per day to 1,381 per day. So this is taking weather into account to normalize the load and then to say what's happening. So ultimately, what we're seeing is about a 2 to 3% reduction in load after weather normalization. And in fact, we're seeing actually our residential class almost make up for the fact that our commercial class and industrial classes are significantly changing their loads. So those are just a couple of examples of dashboards that we've made available and then we continue to make available to our team. And those really are enabled by having access to this platform that centralizes this data. I'll let you go back to presenting now. Beckie, I think I have one more slide to talk to. There we go. And so, this platform really was really instrumental in the integration that we've had with Recurve. So rather than having to, have to go fetch some files that are stored on a drive or a disk somewhere, the data was instantaneously transferred in the form of cleansed data tables from our system to ours. It definitely helped that we both use the same underlying technology, the Google Cloud Platform. But even if we hadn't, our data is in readily available tables that are extremely easy to export and share with other providers. We were able to provide premise data, electric data, gas data, all integrated into one data set and cross-reference. We were able to enrich the data with the tax assessor records and other third-party data that I mentioned. And also the integration is a two-way integration. So the results that we are providing, that Recurve is providing, can flow back into the EBC and have flown back into the EBC warehouse. And so we can use them to further enrich all of the data that we have and start to use them in some of those dashboards that I've shown you. And finally, if we wanted to do a data refresh, it would be push button simple. The scripts are there, rerunning them and then exporting the data is literally just a couple of clicks on our end. So with that, I'll pass it on to the Recurve team.
Great, and then McGee, I'll go ahead and run the slides for you as well until we get to the demo.
Perfect. Okay, so this just to echo what Taj was just saying, having a data set that's well organized and cleaned, it makes our lives a lot easier. And so it's been really great to work with this team and this, and I think they've been pretty open about the type of architecture that they've used, which has really helped to kind of allow other organizations to start thinking about making similar technology investments that I know that they're really helping to spread. So this is great. What we do is, the raw consumption data that comes in from each meter then gets transferred over to the Recurve platform. And where Taj speaks of weather normalizing, that's one of the things that happens. You can do that in a couple of different ways. So we follow the Caltrack methods for weather normalization of hourly consumption data to create individual load shape profiles for every building in the EBCE service territory, so which is around 500,000 or so. And what this allows us to do is that load shape profile is comprised of a lot of underlying statistical data. For example, we can know, for example, the amount of energy use that's being consumed as a result of the need to heat or to cool your building, or to that the amount of energy that's being utilized as part of always on baseload use versus discretionary energy use that goes on and off. And I think, to Taj's earlier point about the kind of the silver lining data science nerd side of the COVID quarantine has really allowed us to see some of that in much greater clarity than before, where a lot of buildings that are, now kind of shut down temporarily still have a lot of baseload that they're, the stuff that's always on is still on, but none of the rest of the energy is on that they would normally use. So kind of getting some interesting perspective on opportunities maybe for greater energy efficiency within the existing building stock. But what we do is take all of those buildings and create these load shape profiles, which allows us to forecast the energy use in all of these buildings, given any sort of temperature that you might expect. So one of the common ways of forecasting is by taking the temperature of a typical weather year, that we kind of know what to expect on an annual basis, and apply the baseline conditions of these buildings to a typical weather year. And so we can kind of know what EBCE's energy use is going to be over the next year. It's going to change from day to day because weather is not always typical, and in fact, it's more and more atypical these days. But nonetheless, we have a pretty good idea of what to expect. And what that allows us to do is to start looking at these buildings individual as potential opportunities for demand side resource flexibility. And so what we mean by that is that buildings that have a lot of energy use, that use energy during the really expensive greenhouse gas emitting times of day, where we're firing up those peaker power plants, those are great candidate buildings for demand side programs, whether it's long-term energy efficiency investments, whether it's short-term demand response, whether it's solar and storage, electric vehicles. We have the opportunity now to be really precise and efficient with our use of scarce resources to go out and target the types of customers that are going to make the biggest impact on our load shape profiles. So if you want to go to the next slide, Becky. This is my favorite slide. It's like the worst webinar slide ever, but to give you a kind of sense, this is the work that Adam does. We don't let him out much. So what we find with these buildings is that they all have these kind of really interesting subtle characteristics. If you were, if we had baseball season going right now and you're a baseball fan, the baseball world is really interested in, the baseball hitters, launch ratio, the launch angle of the balls that they hit, and the velocity of the spin on the curveball, and that tells you, how many home runs they're going to hit, or how many strikeouts they're going to get. And we kind of think about energy use in the same way, that your percent discretionary energy use relative to your winter morning kWh energy use is going to tell us a lot about how you use energy without really needing to get into the private details of any one particular person's energy use patterns. We can anonymize this and sort of treat this as a way of creating visibility into the opportunities for demand side programs without getting up in anybody's business. And what that allows EBCE to do is to design programs that go out and target, like I said, those customers that have the best chance at saving energy given a particular type of program. So I won't spend a lot of time on this slide. I think Adam will start to reference some of these metrics when he gets into his demo. So we can go ahead to the next slide. But I wanted to just give you a look. Actually, well, I don't know if I'll spring this on Adam. I'll do this part real quick. He's got the really fun job. Let me just give you a sneak preview of what he's about to show you, and maybe you guys can think of some good challenges for him. We can put it into the chat function down at the bottom. If you have a question for Adam, or you want him to look at something in particular, just put it into the chat, and we'll try to see if we can do it. One of the questions we asked, well, we didn't actually ask this. This is a hypothetical, but it kind of illustrates the types of questions that we were asking, which was, so what if we wanted to figure out who is driving our summer peak load ramp in Fremont? So if you click here, this is what we did, and we included solar customers in this subset, but we took, click one more time so we can see the map, actually, there we go. So these are all the homes in Fremont. And so we found that the 25% of customers that had the steepest distance between the bottom of the trough, in the mid-afternoon, and the height of the neck of the duck, I guess that's the head of the duck, in the early evening. Now you can imagine that the solar is really having a big impact on who these customers are. But as the sun goes down, solar or not, these are the customers that are causing us to ramp up those peaker power plants. So if we had an opportunity to put in batteries, for example, these would be the houses that would really benefit from being able to offset their load, or to encourage them to use more load during the middle of the day with, say, an electric vehicle that they could charge versus using as much energy in the evening time. Click one more time. I think let's see what we have on this slide. Again, I'm going to go through this kind of quickly to give Adam some time to shine here. So another thing that we looked at was, when is it expensive for EBCE to provide energy? And we're thinking about this, we're thinking about the combination of the costs of acquiring the resource in the first place, plus the environmental costs that are associated with the resource at any given time of day. So again, during the peak ramp times, we're using more greenhouse gases to generate our electricity. than when the sun is shining and we're generating a lot of renewables. So let's take a click on here, and you can see this is actually a sort of a fully loaded cost curve that that's actually developed by the California Public Utilities Commission. And you can see that, you know, here on an annual basis, the avoided costs of, you know, everything put together, so including, you know, transmission, distribution capacity, et cetera, really peak in the late afternoon, evening hours at around $300 per megawatt hour. Click one more time. So the axis just changed. So now we're doubling on the y-axis. In the summertime, that avoidable cost doubles to, you know, over $600 per megawatt hour. A lot of that's in the capacity. You know, our resources are constrained in those evening hours. And so this is when, if we can avoid energy use during this time of day, then, you know, we can potentially reduce our costs quite significantly, which means, you know, potentially lower rates and more benefits everywhere else. Now, Beckie and I had talked about this, you know, quite a bit. Resource adequacy for the CCAs in particular is a really interesting opportunity. We're not quite sure exactly how this is all going to fit together, but it's another dimension of this to be able to deploy demand side resources to offset the costs associated with providing energy during the peak times.
One thing I'll add to this, if I can jump in, from the CCA perspective, we were really interested in understanding the aspects of the avoided costs that relate most specifically to our procurement obligations. And so Recurve actually rolled out a dashboard where you're able to look at the avoided costs and deselect certain aspects of the avoided cost components. So we're able to go in and remove things like line losses and transmission and some of the things that may not be as specific to our portfolio, like the GHG adder. That's sort of a set figure in the CPUC ex-ante framework. And that really helps us hone in on the portions of the value stack that are most relevant to our portfolio.
Nice. So from that, you know, analysis of the entire population with an idea that we could really, you know, home in on those customers that have the greatest potential for savings, we thought about what kinds of procurements for demand side resources could EBCE issue, and, you know, what would that look like from a, you know, finding those customers' perspective. So as another example on this slide, we asked the question, you know, could we find customers with the highest avoidable costs, you know, what we were just showing on that previous slide, as well as those customers with the highest greenhouse gas emissions per kilowatt hour consumed. So this is, you know, kind of an interesting, you know, way of thinking about it. The more energy that you use during peak demand time, where the greenhouse gas emissions are higher, you know, the heavier your carbon footprint is. So if we could really focus on those customers, not only could we reduce the costs for EBCE, but we could also have the best possible impact on the environment. And so if you click, so we did a little bit of you know, targeting, and we found that in the summertime we found a subset of customers, and the red dots, by the way, is the population as a whole, and these were the customers that had that combination of highest greenhouse gas emissions per kilowatt hour consumed and the highest avoidable costs for EBCE. And we know where they are. So if EBCE has a targeted marketing campaign to encourage and incentivize customers to participate in a program, this is the load shape of those customers that they would be targeting. And you can see, if you think about when you're using the most energy is when you have the greatest opportunities for saving energy. And these customers are using very little during the middle of the day when we don't really want them saving more energy, but they're using a lot in the evening when the ramp is you know, at its steepest and its most expensive. The interesting part of this is that we kind of assume that it's going to be the eastern side of the service territory that in which, you know, more of these homes are located. And that's true to some extent, but there's still quite a bit of capacity, demand side opportunity, even in the inner bay. And so one of the benefits of doing this kind of analysis is that we don't just want to target Dublin. We want to target Hayward, but not all of Hayward, but there are just the parts of it that have, you know, those buildings that fit this load shape profile. Okay, demo interlude. So Adam, this is your time to shine. Do you want to share your screen and walk us through a couple? Now, do we get anything in the chat? Nothing in the group chat yet. They don't have any ideas for you of things. We have we can look at anything we want to from EBCE's data, any kind of, you know, load shape profiles, you know, brainstorm away. We're going to put Adam to the test here if we can.
Sure, thanks, McGee. So I think this might make a little bit more sense, the challenge that all of you have to challenge us over here when I walk through some of the functionality. So just to remind people of what we're really doing here, EBCE gave us almost 1 million meters. About 600,000 of those meters were electric, maybe around 400,000 were gas. We have analyzed every single one of those meters using the CalTrack methods and some supplementary analysis. And for each one of those meters, we have assessed various characteristics of energy usage. And some of them are related to load shape, some of them are related to heating and cooling loads. And ultimately, the goal is to help EBCE find the right programs for the right customers. And just by way of a little bit of background, this isn't just sort of shooting fish in a barrel, so to speak. Recurve has taken a look over the last 3 years or so at dozens of energy efficiency programs that have run in the past. And so we're talking deemed programs or custom programs, multifamily, single family, commercial, deep retrofit, light touch. And in almost every case, we find that based on information that we had ahead of time, before the program launched, we are able successfully to find customers that saved a lot and drove cost-effective avoided costs. And we were able to identify customers who didn't really save anything at all, even from deep retrofit programs oftentimes. So the goal here is to take that knowledge, tie them to specific characteristics of customer energy usage that are predictive of savings outcomes, and then help EBCE at an individual customer level find the opportunity for cost-effective savings. That's ultimately the way that we believe we can scale demand-side resources, along with measuring at the meter. So what I'm showing you on my screen right now is the results of all of this analysis. So I can come up here and select among a whole bunch of different categorical data, and then I can start to look at those energy usage characteristics within samples of populations that are relevant for a program. So for instance, I can choose between residential or commercial or industrial customers. I can set ranges on energy usage. So if I wanted to look at small, medium business versus sort of larger businesses, for example, I can choose any city in the East Bay Community Energy Service territory. I can choose among solar customers or care customers if I'm interested in finding low-income customers for a particular type of program. I can choose between all electric customers or customers that have both fuels that we have data for. And then I can set modeling thresholds, so we can help EBCE find customers that not only match certain usage characteristics, but also are very well modeled by the CalTrack method. So we have greater predictability over savings that they are going to achieve in a program. I can choose among different seasons if I want to look at load shapes or weekday versus weekend, for example. And then all of the targeting features that McGee talked about just a moment ago are here and available to us to start to filter customers by their usage characteristics. So let's just go through a quick example here. And I'm going to focus on the commercial sector because I think given the avoided cost profile and what we know about avoided costs peaking in the evening, we're tending to focus quite a bit on the residential sector and believing that's where the opportunity is, because if you've paid attention to DEER or if you use work papers, you you're led to believe that there's not an opportunity in the commercial sector because of these deemed averages. But in reality, there are thousands of customers in EBCE service territory on the commercial side that are evening peaking. And that offer a great opportunity for load shifting and for cost-effective savings that are not going to appear in a work paper. So let's pick the commercial sector and let's think through some characteristics that would help us identify customers that are evening peaking. So first of all, I want to look only at non-solar customers right now. We can bring solar customers in a bit, but I'm only going to look at non-solar customers. I'm really interested in electric right now, but we can get to gas if people are interested in looking at gas data. And really, you know, the summer timeframe, as McGee talked about, is when there's an opportunity to drive very high avoided cost if you can get people to shift load or save load in the evening time period. And, you know, it's actually mainly on the weekdays too. So I'm going to select weekday. So this is just intuitive. This is where the avoided costs are. I'm just going after the avoided costs. And now I'm going to select a couple of features here that are characteristic of helping us identify customers that have evening peaking load shapes. So I'm going to choose evening ramp. And this is the difference between evening usage and midday usage, basically. And I'm going to select customers that are in the top quartile among all EBCE commercial customers that are non-solar in their evening ramp. And then I'm also going to select customers that have a high percentage of their usage in the summer peak period. So we're talking June, July, August, September, 4 to 9 p.m. So I'll select customers that are in the top half of summer peak usage, and let's see what we see. So now this dashboard is literally going to crank through all of these hundreds of thousands of meters, and it's going to spit out at us the customers that we've selected. And it's going to show us a variety of information about this subset of customers. So first of all, what you see here is, like McGee mentioned earlier, the red dots are the average customer of the entire sort of eligible population that we've selected. So commercial, non-solar customers under 250 megawatt hours a year. So sort of small, medium businesses. And the blue curve now is the customers that we've selected by this targeting scheme. So clearly there are many thousands of evening peaking customers. And what you're seeing here is just, this is the first targeting feature. So this is evening ramp versus the second targeting feature, which is the percentage of summer peak usage. So we're really identifying customers who are using sort of at least, you know, maybe on average 10% of their total annual consumption is during the summer peak. And we're also finding customers who have positive evening ramps, you know, above 0 evening ramps. You know, many commercial customers are coming down in the evening, so they have negative evening ramps. So by finding these characteristics and by tying them together in a multi-dimensional targeting scheme, we're able to find for EBCE the subset of commercial customers that have a great opportunity potentially for load shifting or savings above and beyond what you might expect for a DEAR measure, especially when it comes to avoided cost. So I can walk through a whole bunch of different examples here, and if we get some comments in the chat, I'm happy to sort of take them on. Or I have others that we can walk through, solar plus storage examples or electrification, things like that. But have we seen anything in the chat here, McGee, that looks interesting?
Yeah, we've got a bunch of questions coming through. Chris Centieri, Centieri. I'm probably getting that wrong. Chris, you want to unmute yourself, and you got a couple here, so I'll let you pick which one you think you can. This last one is interesting.
Hey guys, this is Chris, and thanks for taking some questions. And again, kudos for all the work. Taj, it's clear how busy you've been since we talked last, and it's really good to see all of this coming through. So, you know, I mean that. I guess really anything you can show us would be great. I asked a couple questions. One, you know, I think is really important for the behind the meter battery plays. Really both of these would fit that bill. But, yeah, you know, peak to average demand ratio of a given customer, being able to rank customers in a given rate schedule based on peak to average demand is how you're going to find the highest demand response value. Much like in the NEM question, if you can find and rank the highest net exporters of NEM customers, those are great opportunities for supply shifting. Both of these things were called out in the LDBP work products, right? So I'm just doubling back on some of the themes that were in the LDBP.
Yeah, great question, Chris, or great commentary. I appreciate that. And so let's actually take that example of looking for customers that have a good opportunity for a battery addition on top of a PV system. So this is something that I think is going to become more and more of a focus, because as McGee already talked about, a lot of these solar customers are really driving a duck curve load shape that is very costly to the utility. And so the question is, which of the solar customers are great targets for a battery retrofit and which may not really deliver? You know, targeting is in part about finding the customers who have a big opportunity, but it's also in part about finding customers who maybe are not worth the investment to the broader rate base, and finding different programs for them that are better fits. So let's actually take this on. Let's look at the residential sector. And we have computed all of the negative energy usage, or the NEM, sort of the NEM time periods, and added all of that together. But actually, I want to focus on a specific targeting feature here. So first of all, I'm going to select solar customers. I don't know that I care about weekday or weekend here. I probably care a little bit more about the annual time frame, or maybe even the shoulder time frame, because now if we're thinking about when we have a lot of electrons that are being dumped into the ground in California, a lot of it's during those shoulder periods when it's mild and there's not a lot of heating and cooling. So why don't we take a look at the shoulder time frame? And then what I'm going to focus on here is a couple characteristics. One is, in the middle of the day, how much kWh are these solar customers using? Now we're talking, a lot of these customers are going to have negative usage in the middle of the day. So let's find customers that are in the sort of bottom half of shoulder midday kWh, because those are actually the customers that we probably want to go after. And let's also find customers that are in the, let's say, the top half of summer peak usage, or peak consumption. So let's find customers in the top half there. And, we can iterate on these things. So this isn't necessarily like the gold standard of a targeting strategy, but at the end of the day, we can always iterate a little bit and find the customers that are the best fit. So what we are finding here are, the customers in blue, which, are a good probably quarter of the eligible population. These are now solar customers in residential, have a much deeper dip than the average customer, and much deeper in particular than the customers we haven't selected. And this is an indication that, hey, if you install a battery, these customers are actually going to charge. And they're not just going to have many days that go by where the battery never sort of gets tapped into. And especially in the summer and the winter, when there's more heating and cooling loads, these customers are still going to charge for the most part. And I could show you the summer, I can show you the winter, but just take my word for that. And then the other aspect of these customers is that they have a higher peak. So if you're talking about wanting to find customers that not only have a good opportunity to charge a battery in the middle of the day, but then can deploy that in the evening and actually shave peak load and really solve the duck curve issue, or mitigate the duck curve issue, then the customers in blue would be the first targets that I would go after. And again, we can refine this a little bit, but this is the broader based strategy there that I would recommend.
That's really awesome, Adam. There's a question that Howard brought up on the chat about the assessor data. I wonder, Taj, do you have any? Have you guys worked on that assessor data? I know that's been an issue we've run into quite a bit, here
Sure.
and there.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that. I actually do have some experience with that from a past life working at DataRaker, which was then acquired by Oracle. But yeah, it's a challenge in the sense that, first of all, we get two sets of addresses. One is the address that's coming from PG&E's data. The other is the address that's coming from the tax assessor data set. So we run through a process where we normalize the addresses, then we geocode the addresses, then we try to match the geocodes to see whether we have records that basically point to the same location. And so that's how we do that process. I think Howard's question is spot on. On the residential sector, you will potentially find multiple multiple tax assessors or multiple buildings that that link to a particular service point, but typically it's the opposite. We will find one tax assessor address, but we will find multiple multiple meters associated with that. And so what we do effectively is we create a higher level field or a higher level entity, which is a location. And then we assign to it the tax assessor records that were matched to that location. And then we assign to it all of the service points that were linked to the same location. And so then we can effectively look it up. But it's always somewhat challenging because tax assessor records are notoriously dirty, I guess is one way to say it, in that they're not always uniform. And frankly, also the data that we get from PG&E, sometimes unit numbers are written out as units, sometimes they're number, sometimes a tax assessor record, if it's like maybe a TIC, it might be for all of the units in the building. So there are those edge cases where we do have to do some arrangements. What we've done is basically we refresh the tax assessor data every week, and we run through processes that do this normalization, and we do the geocoding every week. And we have good match rates. I think above 80% of our service points have a tax assessor record associated with them. But exceeding 90 to 95% is I think extremely hard because of just all of these issues with address conventions and these multiple records per location.
Yep, makes sense. And Howard had another question that Beckie promised to get back to at the end. So I'll end the demo here. Thank you, Adam, for walking us through that. Obviously, this is really exciting stuff.
Yeah. One really quick note, just on the tax assessor information, is that for each one of these targeting schemes, for them to be really actionable, you got to know which are the customers. And I've removed any personally identifiable information here, but at the bottom of this whole dashboard is a table that gives you all of the customer information, and including the tax assessor data. So you can, all of that we've tied into this at an individual meter level. So it makes all this information that much more actionable for EBCE to utilize and just have it at, at a one-stop shop.
Nice. Okay.
There was also a question about gas data and about, I think Howard also had a question about the data flows and gas data. So SMUD is our third-party data management and call center provider. So they are responsible for doing the data transfers. So, but basically the meter data and the billing determinants go from PG&E to SMUD, and then from SMUD to us, and then we then populate that information for Recurve. We also do receive some reports from PG&E that are standard reports that can be requested. They're called item 16 and item 17. So we also directly load those reports to augment our data, because there's always the opportunity for some data to be missing from one set or the other. And then on the gas data, PG&E does provide CCAs with the gas data in its service territory. And again, it's actually what's called item 16, which is another report. And that also has, we have to go through the same exercise almost, if you will, as a tax assessor data. We have to match it we try to match it by account ID, which is great because that takes care of a bunch of these. But then sometimes we can't find an account ID that exists on the electric side or vice versa. And so then we look at the addresses associated with them, and then we try to map them to exactly the same way, to the same service location, if you will, to do that. That process, I think we've achieved like over 98% of the matching of the gas data, over 90% of the matching of the gas data. I do believe we do have some gas accounts out there that just don't have a corresponding electric account, but that's really, really rare.
Great. So I will take this back over for a little bit to start to move into how we're using some of these analytics to drive considerations in program design. and how we've started to move forward with some procurements. So one really messy slide, I'm going to throw McGee under the bus for the slide, but I can speak to it, just kind of gives an example of how many different players there are in the market. And we've given some consideration to this as we've moved into program design and are trying to understand, first of all, how we can use our unique situation as a revenue funded agency to value stack between different programs and draw connections so that we can manage these sort of distributed portfolio of resources through one or two program design touch points. So just kind of gives you an example of how crowded this space is right now, how many different players there are. So again, to touch back in on some of the driving thoughts or some of the guiding principles, I should say, with our program designs, we're trying to gather demand side resources, targeting customers to understand the ones that will give us the biggest avoided cost impacts, focusing in on that peak load reduction as our key resource area, and trying to have these holistic programs that integrate resources and provide opportunities for load flexibility. So work in progress. We are hoping to roll out some of these procurements either through April or May in the RFI and contracting phase, and hopefully, pending this global pandemic and shelter in place, would like to have implementers out in the field this summer. So the two primary concepts that we're working with right now are a residential program. We'd like to stack on top of existing programs. We're in conversations with some implementers in the region to see how we can do this. And the concept here is that many savings that act under an energy efficiency portfolio are claiming based on specific load shapes. And with us driving focus on peak load reductions and expanding the options in terms of measures that implementers can install, we're curious to see if we can drive additional peak savings above and beyond those forecasted deemed savings values. The idea here being that for those customers that participate in a residential program, for example, we will allow implementers to also enroll in our pay for performance program, measure the impacts on the meter, compare those against the forecasted savings in the energy efficiency program, and pay an incentive for the differential, the incremental savings over the forecasted amount, and paying a higher incentive for those customers that achieve those savings in peak times as well. Another theory that we're working with here is that if we help those implementers understand which customers are in that targeted zone, those customers that we've identified would benefit the most from participating in a program like that, we may pay an enrollment bonus to the implementers as well for managing to get those customers on board in programs. For the commercial program, we're thinking about looking at those implementers who typically have not participated in CPUC ratepayer funded programs because they often come with a lot of administrative, a high administrative load and some constraints around what they're able to do. And if we can recruit participation from folks like that, examples include folks like Carbon Lighthouse and Redaptive, and offer them a classic meter-based savings program, but again, really driving focus on peak demand reductions and expanding measures. So it's not just energy efficiency funding, but focusing on flexible load strategies as well, then that might be another way that we can drive higher participation and specifically focus in on the resources that are of most interest to us. We've also considered for this program a somewhat similar incentive structure, but tying some of the price signals possibly to greenhouse gas emissions. So if we can help give price signals to implementers that match energy savings to high marginal GHG rates, we can also get those implementers to focus in on strategies that will reduce energy use at times when it is of the most greenhouse gas savings benefit to our programs as well. And similar to the residential sector, we're also considering in this space targeting that cohort of customers that we've identified who are the biggest contributors to peak and have the highest marginal GHG emissions, and giving enrollment bonuses if they can capture customers in that category. So that was very quick, but that was the quick and dirty about what we're talking about for how we're going to actually transform these tools, use them to design programs, and get out into the space of pilots. At this point, I'd love to open it up if there are any other questions. You can send them through the chat, or you can take yourself off mute. one question that did come in from Tom Webster, because he missed the opening of this, is whether or not these tools are available to individual customers, for example, residential or citywide. At this point, they are not. These are tools that we are using to support our business operations. I will say, however, that we are working with cities and implementers to structure data sharing where and how we can. For example, we have a program at East Bay Community Energy where we will share data with energy efficiency implementers to help them be more effective in the deployment of their programs. We ask that implementers execute an NDA with us and be very focused with their data request, and then we run that through, make sure we are screening for 15 by 15 and other data privacy regulations of the CPUC, and then we'll execute, then we'll send the data to them. So that's one way that we're sort of trying to leverage our position in the market and our unique capabilities to help all implementers be a little more effective. Happy to answer any other questions. Not all at once.
We've stunned them, Beckie.
Awesome. I will say, as someone who came to EBCE on the 2nd of December after having worked at local government, state government, MCE, private sector, the data tools that Taj and his team have put together and being able to sort of leverage those to work with Recurve has given us visibility into our platform, and the power for program design is just unlike anything I've ever seen. So it's really exciting for me as an implementer and as a program designer to have access to those tools. It's been really exciting. And I can't wait to get these programs off the ground so we can bring some of these, do another webinar series in 6 months to a year and talk about the results.
I'd like to further my questions, Beckie. This is Tom Webster, about access to this data. So you mentioned that you could work with the cities, for example. I'm in Piedmont, of course, and so we're quite interested in the kind of data that you seem to have at your fingertips there in all these platforms, in this amazing platform. So can we work with you to get that data for Piedmont citywide, or even, you know, more granular, like customers, like solar customers, for example, and those kinds of things?
I'll let Taj answer that too, Tom, but what I would say first off is that we have some limitations about what data we can share due to CPUC privacy regulations governing the use of that data. And then there may be some further business constraints, but Tom, you know how to get a hold of me. So I would recommend that you craft a query in an email for us, and we can send it over to the analytics team and talk about whether or not that's something we have capacity to take on.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Hi, I have a question. Hi, McGee.
Hey.
From SF Environment. It's really exciting to see this platform. It's kind of looks like the utility of the future, and all the integrations that you're doing. Are you using the information that you can compare between solar and electric only customers to inform building electrification rollouts and how to approach it?
Yeah, I can speak to that. So we are on the cusp of rolling out a heat pump water heater incentive program in East Bay Community Service Area. We're going to be participating in the Bay Ren regional program along with MCE at first, eventually Clean Power SF, and Peninsula Clean Energy will be joining. And that program can stack on top of Bay Ren. So that's me taking a moment to just market the soon to be available incentives. However, since, as many of us know in this space, there are still often electric service issues associated with electrifying your existing building loads that are natural gas loads. And on top of that, there are often some rate issues because the baseline allocation has not yet been adjusted for hot water heating. I know that PG&E is working on a proposal for the CPUC that they'll be submitting in May to offer an electrification incentive to help offset that issue. In the meantime, however, existing solar customers really are kind of the best cohort for building electrification. So one of the ways that we're planning on leveraging this platform and these tools is by identifying those solar customers, and particularly the ones who have a high water heating load, and sending them direct mailers to sort of say, hey, we have this program coming. We think you should take advantage. So that's just one example of the ways that we're doing that.
Great. Any other questions from any folks? This is great. We appreciate you guys staying on a little bit longer than we had scheduled for. It's hard to say goodbye when you're having this much fun. But without, I guess, yeah. So let's wrap up then. I think wanted to just thank everybody for tuning in today. Thank you to Beckie and Taj for being great collaborators in this effort and helping us, leverage your data, and thanks to all of you for tuning in today. Have an enjoyable rest of your day.
Thanks. Yep.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Mhm.